realize you don't have a microphone.
I've got a microphone.
You have one. Excellent.
You want a microphone?
It's okay. We don't. You can hear me. Can you not? Yeah.
Yeah.
It has a good thing about acoustics. Well, I'm Vicky Carpo. I'm a professor in dance here, and person who is organizing, if you like, the Arts for Wellbeing series of events that include a number of public lectures as well as workshops, intensive weekends. We're hoping to create a sort of momentum and grow expertise, knowledge, interest around the area of art and the contribution to well-being. Today, we're very fortunate to have spent already 4 or 5 hours in a workshop with Raymond, who is our guest for today. Raymond MacDonald, Professor Raymond MacDonald, colleague, friend, an inspirational figure, definitely in my life, and somebody I have a great respect for all his contribution he has done in the area, in the field of music, improvisation, music psychology. Raymond is coming down from Edinburgh University. He's the head of music up in Edinburgh University, having been a music psychologist in the past, and continuing to be, probably, yeah? So he has done a number of, he's one of the, I was saying at the workshop earlier, he's one of the most prolific man I've ever met in my life. He's only a year older than me, and he has done volumes of produce, if you like, both in terms of his academic work. He became a professor before the age of 40, which was a massive record, and for good reason, because he deserved it. And so he's very prolific. He has edited books, he has written publications, articles in academic journals, etc. And he's managing to have kept a very active artistic career as a musician, a music improviser, and a community musician, I would say. But that's a label I'm placing with you. I haven't checked it, whether that's indeed something you would define yourself as. So Raymond has told me off some years back when I claimed I'm not musical. And he sort of slapped my hands and said, oh, everyone is musical. So with that as a concept, I guess today he will very much tell not just me, but you as well, and hopefully through the video recording, more people than who are here today, about musicality, and why this is an important cause, and why all of us have it somehow. So, should I pass on?
Yes. Thank you very much, Vicky, for that introduction. It's wonderful to be here today to talk to you about my work. As Vicky says, we've worked together and collaborated together now for more than 10 years, and it's really great to get the chance to continue our work together by getting the chance to speak to you. And Vicky's an inspirational figure for me as well, so thank you very much for that introduction. But I'd like to begin by just playing a very brief improvisation that I'll come back to during my talk, but a couple of notes to begin with. We are all musical. Every human being has a biological and social guarantee of musicianship. And when I say that, I don't say that as a vague utopian ideal or a conclusion drawn by liberal academics in sort of wishful thinking type way, but this assertion is now well evidenced from a variety of different, quite hard-nosed academic disciplines looking at the scientific, the social, the psychological foundations of musical behaviour. And what I'd like to do in my talk today is to present some of the evidence to support that assertion, with a particular emphasis upon improvisation and highlighting why I think improvisation is a particularly important site to look at the roots of human musicality. Now, there's a quote from Charlie Parker: "If you don't live it, it won't come out of your horn." Now, that quote's often used as a way of discussing the hedonistic and sometimes self-destructive lifestyle of jazz musicians, particularly the bebop jazz musicians of the 1940s and 1950s. But for me, that quote also highlights the absolutely inextricable link that exists between music and wider social, cultural and psychological variables. Our lives are completely meshed with music. Music is a fundamental part of our life, and in many ways a defining feature of our humanity. And so I'd like to discuss some of those issues as well today in my talk. So now, there's no doubt that there has been an explosion of interest around understanding the biological and psychological foundations of musicality, with a particular emphasis upon its relationship in health. But why is music so topical? It's hardly a week goes by when there isn't an article in a national broadsheet discussing one of the psychological aspects of music, the effects of music on various aspects of our personality. And I've got some possible reasons here as to why there has been this explosion of interest in music. I mean, music is ubiquitous, yes. Doesn't matter which society you visit in present day or which society you want to look at historically, music exists and has existed to fulfill a variety of social, medical, educational, artistic and aesthetic functions. Of music surrounds us. Music is emotional in the sense that one of the primary functions, one of the primary is to be moved emotionally, to experience emotions. Now, whether the relationship between a composer, a performer, a recorded piece of music and the emotions that you experience is particularly complex, and there's a wealth of research now investigating the relationship between music and emotions, but there is no doubt that music affects our emotions quite profoundly. Music is engaging. Quote from Michael Tout, an American music therapist: "The brain that engages with music is changed by music. There are anatomical and physical changes in the brain that take place when we listen to and when we perform music as well." So music is engaging at a neurological level. Music is distracting. When we listen to music, we can be distracted as well as engaged. We can be distracted from thoughts that we're having trouble keeping out of our mind. We can use music to help distract us as well as engage us. And I'm going to talk about these features of music in a little bit more detail. Music is physical. When you're engaged in playing music, it involves motor coordination. There's research to show that drummers are involved in a physical workout when they're playing music. So music is intensely physical. Music is ambiguous, and this is a particularly important aspect of music, regardless of what emotion a composer wishes to imbue a piece of music with, regardless of what emotion I was trying to convey in the saxophone when I was playing there.
You filter all your musical experiences, all your music listening through your own history, through your own social environment, and through your own cultural expectations. Therefore, music is essentially ambiguous. And although there is a huge research literature around looking at the effects of particular types of music, particular structural features of music, at its heart, music is ambiguous. Music is social. And I would say that's one of the ways in which we define music, rather than define music through the structural and acoustic properties of a particular stimulus. Music is defined by the social context in which it's placed. So the social aspects of music are absolutely fundamental to the way in which we define music. Music is communicative. Another primary reason for listening to music is to communicate, to reach out, to touch other people. And one of the reasons for listening to music is to have that connection with other people. The profession of music therapy, and I've been lucky enough to collaborate with many music therapists over the years, and they've been a huge inspiration to my work. But music therapists understand the process of musical communication in a very sophisticated way. And I constantly reading around and trying to collaborate with music therapists because they understand this process in a very detailed way. Music affects our behaviour. There is no doubt that when we listen to music, our behaviour can be changed. Whether that's when we're in a supermarket, as some research has shown that when French music is being played in a supermarket, the sales of French wine increases. When German music is being sold in a supermarket, the sale of German wine increases. Whether that's in a restaurant, playing music in restaurants affects the speed at which we eat. There's a whole range of ways in which music affects our behaviour. And music plays a key role in our identity, how we define ourselves. Music plays a role in how we define ourselves. If you ask a young person to tell them a little bit about themselves, they may tell you their age, what school they went to, what they're studying, but they'll use music as a badge of identity. They'll say, I like this type of music. And also, that process continues throughout the lifespan as well. Music is an important marker of our identity, not just as musicians in terms of the music that we play, but also in terms of listeners. So these features, I would argue, are one of the reasons why music is so topical right now, why music is being researched across a whole range of academic disciplines. The foundations of musical behaviour are being researched across a whole range of topics within academia. Listen, some more, a little bit more detailed examples here. Some of my early work in this area looked at, well, that picture's it's so big, it's gone a little bit pixelated. Looking at the effects of playing gamelan music for people with learning disabilities. In this particular series of studies, individuals with mild or moderate learning difficulties took part in gamelan workshops. And over the course of 6 months, we were able to show significant improvements in musical ability, significant improvements in communication skills, and significant improvements in self-esteem and self-perception. Now, that goes back to my earlier statement about us all being musical. Here is evidence for us all being musical. And when I say that, often I'm faced with people saying, well, we might all be musical, but not me, not my family. My family, we don't have the musical gene. I'm tone deaf. There's evidence to suggest that 14% of the population will self-refer as tone deaf at any particular time. But there's also evidence to say that tone deafness really doesn't exist. Because in order to take turns in conversation effectively, in order to engage in social interactions, we need to be able to differentiate the tone and the pitch of the melodic contour of somebody's voice. Often when people say to me, I'm tone deaf, or I can't, I'm not musical, I'll get a story and they'll recount their first experiences of music. And what's fascinating for me is there's now archetypal story that I hear. I hear the same story week in, week out, and that story goes something like, I remember when I was at school and I wanted to play the trombone, or I wanted to join the choir, and there was only one space in the choir, and the teacher gave us a test, and I couldn't sing the notes that the teacher asked me to sing, and so the teacher suggested that I join the football team. Now, I'm not using this as an example to beat up teachers. I'm just saying that's a very similar. People have a negative experience with music, but what's amazing is that people take these early non-contingency experiences and they internalize them for 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years. People fail at music at first, and then they decide that they're not musical. They've used this negative experience. Now that flies in the face of all psychological evidence to suggest if you want to get better at something, you persevere. The work with the special needs participants in the Gamelan shows that we can show significant improvements in musical ability for people that have quite significant learning difficulties after 6 months. How do we learn aspects? How do we learn other skills in life? Think of learning to drive a car. Learning to drive a car involves advanced motor coordination, where to put your feet, where to put your hands, to look out the window. You've got to coordinate these different types of activity together in order to successfully drive the car. My argument here is that musical performance is advanced motor coordination at one level. To begin with, you have to where to put your fingers on the fretboard, where do you strum the guitar, put your hands on the keyboard. But received wisdom, people rarely say, oh, I don't have the driving gene, I'm not one of God's drivers, I don't have my family, I'm not from a family of drivers, so we don't drive. It sounds ridiculous, but my argument is that the same skills are involved to begin with. Also think of how a young baby learns to walk as well. One of the huge milestones in our life, learning to walk. A young baby learns to walk by going up on its hands and knees, crawling a little bit, taking it, standing up, falling over, the family, oh, well done, you stood up, taking its first steps. It's a huge milestone in our life, taking these first steps, and we're encouraged, and it's a cliche. We fall over, we get back up again, we get lots of encouragement. But let's rewind that and take the archetypal musical story and place that on the walking scenario. So a baby gets up, takes its first steps, falls over, and the parent says, you don't have the walking gene, I'm afraid. You're not one of God's walkers. Can you just sit in the chair? It sounds ridiculous, but my argument is that that's what happens in music. People internalize these non-contingency experiences, but we have evidence to suggest that that's not the case, that we can all learn to communicate through music. Just checking my time here. Whoa, yeah. Okay, so another example of some of the research I've been involved in is in music listening. This graph here shows the effects of listening to music in a hospital after an operation. Participants in the experimental group listened to their favourite music after a minor operation on their toe in the hospital, and participants in the control group that listened to any music. The key finding that's demonstrated in this graph is that listening to your favourite music in the hospital significantly reduces your experiences of anxiety. Key point is that it's our favourite music. It's not relaxing music. It's not Mantovani. It's not Mozart. It's not Beethoven. It's our favourite music. It can be the Beatles. It can be Metallica. It could be Pavarotti, Glenn Miller. We've got all sorts of examples. We've now repeated this study half a dozen times in various different contexts, but we get the same result regardless of the music that's chosen. So music profoundly affects how we feel. It can affect our pain perceptions. It can affect our anxiety perceptions. This is an example of a study that we did in a laboratory setting. Believe it or not, this picture is a way of ethically inducing pain in participants. I hope I don't sound like we're being sadistic. It keeps water at a cold temperature. That's all it is. Basically, participants put their hands in cold water, and we say, when the water gets too cold, take your hands out of the water. But while they're doing that, we play them music. And what we find is that when they listen to their favourite music, they keep their hands in the water for much longer, sometimes 2 or 3 times as long. So listening to your favourite music significantly affects your pain perceptions and your anxiety perceptions in this laboratory context as well. I'm making the case for music being a fundamental part of our life. I'm making the case for us all being musical. I'm suggesting that one of the reasons that music is so topical right now is there's a whole range of research. Are these reasons down the side? It's ubiquitous, emotional, engaging, distracting, physical, ambiguous, social, communicative, affects our behaviour, and it plays a key part in our identity. But improvisation is a fundamental part of musical behaviour. This is a quote from Derek Bailey's book from 1992. Improvisation enjoys the curious distinction of being the most widely practiced of all musical activities and the least acknowledged and understood. So, we're all, as well as us all being musical, we're all improvising. And there's evidence to support that as well. The work of Colin Trevarthen at Edinburgh University has shown how the earliest communication between a parent and a child, the cooing and the babbling and the interaction that takes place between a parent and a child in those early days, weeks and months has more in common with music than with natural language. It is a musical communication. So we're all musical because we're all born communicating musically with our parents. And moreover, it's an improvisation. We're all born improvisers. Now that has quite profound implications. Music plays an absolutely fundamental role in the earliest and most important bonding relationship of our life, that with our parents. The patterns of interaction that take place during those early weeks and months will influence us to a greater or lesser extent depending upon your theoretical orientation, but they will influence us for the rest of our life. And those interactions are crucially musical and improvisatory. So we are all musical in the sense that we're all born musical and we're all born as improvisers. Now, this begs the question, what is improvisation? And this is quite a topical question as well. So what is improvisation and why is it important? And this takes me back again to the title of my talk. So here we have Daniel Barenboim. Daniel Barenboim gave the Wreath Lectures 5 or 6 years ago for the BBC. And at the end of his first lecture, he was asked by Julian Joseph, an English piano player, you haven't mentioned improvisation in your talk about the importance of music. You've discussed music across the world. What do you think of improvisation? And Barenboim paused and said very eloquently, improvisation is the highest form of art. And he explained why he thought improvisation was the highest form of art, discussing the technical mastery, the lightning responses that improvisers have, the way in which they communicate emotions, conforming to a very popular notion of improvisation, that it is the pinnacle of musical communication, that you've mastered your instrument, you're able to communicate at lightning fast speeds, and you're able to make these connections with other people in an improvisatory context. Now, a couple of weeks later, after I heard Barenboim give his Wreath Lectures, I was watching Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory with my daughters. And there's a scene in Willy Wonka, and it was the Johnny Depp version, not the Gene Wilder version. There's a scene in that film where Augustus Gloop falls into the chocolate river, and the Oompa Loompas sing, big fat greedy Augustus Gloop is a big fat nincompoop, and he gets sucked out and taken out of the factory. At that point, Charlie asks Willy Wonka, how did the Oompa Loompas know that Augustus Gloop was going to fall into the river? Because they sang the song immediately. And Willy Wonka says to Charlie, improvisation is a parlor trick. Anyone can do it. So here we have two competing definitions of improvisation. Improvisation as the highest form of art, and improvisation as a parlor trick. Now, both for me are problematical. Both for me have some merits. But the strangest thing happened not long after I saw Willy Wonka in the Chocolate Factory. I was in a chip shop in Glasgow. I had been stuck on a plane all day, and it had snowed, and the city had come to a standstill, and I had gone to get the family tea. I went for chips because we were stuck. And while I was in the chip shop, Billy Connolly walked in. And I thought, wow, what a moment. I'm meeting Billy Connolly in a Glaswegian chip shop. It's kind of, it's the place to meet Billy Connolly. And we struck up this conversation about music. He asked me what was I doing, and we started talking about the sympathetic strings on Norwegian violins. We had this amazing conversation about folk music. But then he asked me, what instrument do you play? And I said, he said, what sort of music do you play? I said, I play jazz music. He goes, and what instrument do you play? And I said, I play the saxophone. He goes, do you know Mickey Deans, who's an old Glaswegian saxophonist? I said, yes, I do know Mickey Deans. And he said, and do you play in the big band with Mickey Deans in that big band? And I said, well, I used to play with Mickey Deans in the big band, but I now play improvised music. And I sort of coyly said, unlistenable music nobody likes, and so I don't play with Mickey anymore. And he looked at me, and this is what he said. He looked at me and said, brilliant! He said, that's brilliant! If those jazz bastards don't like you, you must be doing something right. And that gave me another definition of improvisation. Because improvisation as something that has to conform to a certain criteria. And if you're upsetting the jazz bastards, you must be doing something right, because maybe those jazz musicians are a little bit conservative in what they think improvisation should be. And it kind of squared the circle for me, because I thought, yes, Barnbaum's notion of improvisation is similar to the jazz bastards' notion of improvisation. It's something that elite musicians engage in. It's something that you have to study. It's something that you can only do if you've learned the changes. Yet, Willy Wonka's notion of improvisation as a parlour trick. So once again, it's something that we can all do, but actually doesn't involve so much skill. Yet, and if, as a musician, you try to improvise using techniques maybe that are outside of the norm, then you're going to upset people. Because people's livelihoods and people's identities are very tied to certain types of improvisation. So there's three, and then sorry, this final picture is the art centre. Because what I thought, when I arrived today, beautiful sunny day, it was a fabulous introduction to this wonderful campus, a fabulous introduction to the buildings. But when I arrived, the space there, I took a picture when I came back after court, but the space was just full of people dancing, of people rehearsing. Somebody was tying tubes around their leg and doing it. To me, it embodied this idea of us all being improvised. What I saw was a sort of improvisatory extravaganza out in the sun as I arrived, and at the Arts Centre were sort of emblazoned sort of to greet me. I thought it was living proof of the ubiquitousness of improvisation, but improvisation in the broadest context. So what I'd like to do now is we've had a little bit of an introduction, theoretical introduction. I've given you a sort of an example of different types of improvisation. I want to do a practical example to highlight a number of my points. One, that we're all musical, and two, that we can all improvise, and that improvisation possibly is not the preserve of elite musicians, but neither is it just a parlour trick that we can all engage in. So what we're going to do, we're going to form a choir instantaneously. I'm going to conduct the choir. I'm going to give you some cues. So when I hold out my hand like this, I would like you to sing. Look, when my finger touches my palm, sing a long note. Any long note you want. Okay, that's really important. Don't try and be in tune. I just need a long note. But wait until my finger touches my palm, and when my finger comes off my palm, stop. If I clench my fist like that, that's a short note that I want. And you wait until my finger touches my knuckles, and you sing the shortest note you possibly can. Whatever you want, but it's a short note. So we'll have long notes and short notes. If I push my finger out here, I'm asking for a long note. So you sing a long note when my hand's outstretched. But that's going to say there's going to be another note to follow. And if I move my hand up, I'd like a higher note. Any note that's higher, you choose, but it has to be higher in comparison to the first note. If I go down, it's lower. So you go la, 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 la. Once again, I'm not concerned with the actual note that you pick here. I'm just concerned with its relative pitch. That's all we're going to do. Long notes, short notes, and relative pitch. And we're going to spontaneously create a piece of music together. That piece of music will have improvisatory elements because it will never be repeated again. Whatever you do will never be repeated again, but it will be in the moment. Okay? You with me? So, here we go. Hey, well done, well done. that was, well, I don't know where that came from, but we could spend the rest of the lecture quite productively analysing what happened there. And I think for me, it just provides more evidence for this notion. I mean, there was a tonality. Some of you there, some of this audience might well say, well, I might well have raised your hands when you say who's not musical. But what happened there was you agreed on a tonality. I don't know how that happened, but there was a negotiation that happened there, and you agreed on a tonality, and sort of quite conventional melodies emerged. Now, my goal was not to produce a conventional melody. Actually, what I was going to say was, isn't it amazing that we can randomly pick a whole range of notes and it can sound quite convincing? And I think that also happened as well. The random collection of notes, when we all commit to the process and when we all commit to what we were doing there, produces something that is rewarding to engage in. And also, I would argue, musical. So, you know, I'm not being glib or patronising when I say, you know, that was a performance by an improvising choir. And, you know, give us a couple of hours together in a room and we could create something unique and special. Also, I'll go back to Daniel Barenboim, Willy Wonka, and Billy Connolly here and say, yes, many of you maybe won't have had much experience of improvisation. So it was, in some respects, challenging the notion of improvisation as the highest form of art. But it's not just a parlour trick, because you need to invest time and effort in it as well, and in the right context it can be particularly special. The improvisation is at the heart of our musical learning. How does a young child explore the piano for the first time? You've seen it bangs the keys, hits the side of the piano. It's playing, the young child's playing the piano with an adventurousness, a sense of, it's not trying to play the right note or worried about playing the wrong note. The child is exploring the piano for its sonic possibilities, its playful possibilities as well. Improvisation can be right at the heart of music education and our earliest experiences of music. Those conduction signs that I use with you in terms of to demonstrate the ubiquitous of improvisatory and the fact that we're all musical, we can use those conduction signs with young kids when they're learning to play music. What I do is I use table tennis bats with stop and go written on them, green and red table tennis bats, and they conduct each other, and they hold the bat up for a loud note and they hold it down for a long note, and once again, it's a game, but it's an improvisatory game where the children are exploring their musicality. If you like, we're scaffolding their musical learning by using these types of conducted games in an improvisatory context. But also, I should point out that those signs that I used, there's over 200 of those signs, and they can be used with world-leading improvising musicians when you get together to perform as a large ensemble. There's groups all over the world now that use these signs as a way of structuring improvisation as well. So it's not the case that the signs are just for entry-level musicians who want to begin to improvise. This process has applicability across a whole range of different domains. I should start to wrap up. Okay, so I just want to give a couple of examples of, so I've discussed what is improvisation. It's creative, it's universal, it's spontaneous, it's non-verbal, and it's group activity. And I think that's one of the reasons why, or some of the reasons why, improvisation is a unique form of social creativity. I want to just give a couple of quotes from jazz, let me just, so when we think of, sorry, I'm improvising here, I'm going to skip to this one, sorry. So, to finish with is a discussion of the use of improvisation in therapeutic contexts. So, this study looks at a qualitative study of the psychological processes involved in music therapy sessions with cancer patients. So, as another example to highlight universality of musical communication, to highlight how we're all improvisers, and to look at the foundations of improvisation. So this was an in-depth investigation of psychological processes involved in the music therapy program with cancer patients. 9 participants took part in semi-structured interviews before and after the intervention, and we interviewed all the participants using interpretive phenomenological analysis. So 9 participants who had no previous experience of playing music came together twice a week to be involved in group music therapy discussion, group music therapy sessions. Music therapists led the sessions. Those sessions were essentially improvisatory, and we interviewed all the participants. And after the interviews, we coded them, analysed the interviews, and looked for some of the themes. So here's an example: free expression and communicating through music. It's not like I was speaking to the person, it's just you're getting involved, through music. It's not like sitting and trying to make a conversation. Yes, we can all communicate at the same time by playing an instrument, whereas if you're verbally communicating, you cannot all talk at the same time, whereas we can all play a tune, we can all be heard at the same time. And if you hear someone, you can pick up their rhythm, you can join in, maybe pick up on someone else's, join in with them. So everybody is playing a tune, everybody is communicating, and you can pick up certain tunes or sounds or rhythms, join in with the other person. So this was a very important theme for the participants: the ability to communicate, to express themselves freely through the music. Recognition that when you're talking, you have to take your turn in a conversation, you have to wait, we can't all talk at the same time. When you play music, you can all play music together. You can all communicate at the same time and communicate meaningfully at the same time. This was a very important part, and that's done through the improvisatory context as well. So that was very important for the participants. Another key aspect was the importance of the group context, going back to the social aspect of improvisation. I like being near people. I enjoyed that. I enjoyed coming and the chit-chat between us. How do we laugh now and then? As I said, we're all in the same boat. We're all trying, enjoying it. I see the first day, I was really looking forward to the next time. I've enjoyed meeting other people, playing the instruments. I just think it's been a lovely experience. and I've really enjoyed it, and I'm sure it's been helpful, because when you're confined mostly to the house and you can't move about, it's a very nice experience to be taken to a nice place like this, playing the instruments, listening to music, hearing other people. Really, it's been very worthwhile. There is the importance of the group context that was central in this theme, that music provided a place where people could meet together, be involved in purposeful activity, and I would go back to these points as well: emotional, engaging, social, communicative activity that was found very rewarding. It helped participants bond, recognition that they were all in the same boat, they were all going through this very difficult period of their lives together, and sharing something within the musical context. So in closing, I guess that's the kind of summary picture that I'd like to present. We are all musical, because there's evidence to show that we can all learn to communicate through music. The notions of being what it is to be musical is a social construction. We can all learn to play music because there's evidence of people with learning difficulties learn to play music. We can all communicate through music using the example that we all sang in the room together. We were all improvising together. You were all making choices, informed choices about what notes to sing. And some more examples of the social and context of improvisation with the girls singing the nursery rhymes. And also some qualitative and quantitative research that I've been involved in, looking at different aspects of the foundations of musical behaviour. So I think I should finish now, and I'll hand back to Vicky. But yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
We'll have this. I'm going to open it up for Q&A. Just before we do that, just to say a few words, thanking Raymond for the contribution, the input offered for us, and to say that it's interesting to be challenged about my own musicality by listening to Raymond's presentation. A few comments from me in terms of what I was left with. It's the question around the contribution of music. The contribution music can make in terms of well-being and tolerance to pain, for example, things like that, in terms of the choice of personal music. And then it becomes even more so the personal input when it comes to improvisation. So there's something about the linking musicality with who we are on a personal level, and how we communicate with others, which I think is very important in terms of its contribution to well-being. The social connection is very important, and also the connection with movement. I think that some of the examples we had here, the two, we have learned somehow to compartmentalize. What's the word? I can never pronounce the word. Definitely this is so much the case when it comes to different types of art in the West. We have put music there, dance there, art further away, and somehow a lot of what we're hearing today is very much about bringing things together as well. So that's another comment I would like to make. And I'd like to open it up to the floor. We have 5-10 minutes. We have a question here that is busted to come out. Do we have more questions? Should we take that and we'll see where we're going? Yeah?
Mine was, it's an observation. My grandson was born with cerebral palsy, bulbar palsy, so he also couldn't speak or swallow or use any, he had no form of communication, affected his ears as well. And I know the school he went to, they did something called eurythmy, which was good for him. But his sister plays the piano at home and also the violin. He didn't really like the violin. That seemed to distress him. He loved the piano. And the harder she did that, the better. But then he couldn't move very well, but he managed to climb over to get to the piano, and he would really make a noise, and it was a way of him communicating, and just the way you've explained it's helped me understand his only form of communication, really, which was music and that sound. It was it's just all made more sense today, so thank you.
No, thank you very much. Thanks. I think that's key for a lot of people who have trouble communicating conventionally for whatever reason. Music can provide a lifeline to these communicative interactions. There is no doubt that music is a separate and quite discrete channel of communication. It's not just like language, or it's not just a similar transport mechanism to language. It is something quite separate, quite unique and special, and it does provide these absolutely crucial lifelines to interaction.
Were there any common tones or connotations from the people experimenting with music that could correlate to the type of illness that they were experiencing? See what I mean?
Well, yes. I think the short answer in this context is no. I don't think that that we found any common structural features in the music that in any way were related to the physical symptoms of the participants. But there is a research in that area, and there's quite a lot of work being carried out looking at the relationship between particular types of music, particular structural features.
Yes, it's also an issue of whether one is looking
Yes,
for
that
that
was
or not. And if the project was about people's experiences, it would be less about music as a diagnostic tool of a disease or, sort of which is what I think.
Should we, I know we have another question there. Richard, do you want to?
Yes, thank you. Thanks for the talk, terrific. The composer, John Cage, and you can probably guess what's coming, now I've said his name. John Cage rejected improvisation, said that far from it being an encounter with the unanticipated, it was in fact musicians' tendencies to go over old ground and do favourite tricks and so on. Yeah. And I mean, with your lovely Evan Parker-like improvisation just now, I suppose the end of say the clicks were something that you would attract our ears. What do you make of his position?
Sure. I mean, that's a great question, and it's a really important point. I mean, there's lots of responses to that. I suppose John Cage's rejection of improvisation, but I mean, he also used the term indeterminacy as well. And I can't help but feel that when Cage does this, what he's doing is diminishing the role of the performer. It's not necessarily, for me, the improvisatory aspects, because I think indeterminacy and improvisation are very similar. But what I think he's doing, and it's a positioning of, maybe not himself, but a positioning of the composer. Because what I feel he's saying is he's privileging the composer's intent to say, well, this is indeterminacy, this is my idea of indeterminacy. The improvisatory aspects are not so important, but it's the conceptual ideas behind the indeterminacy that's important. So I feel slightly that he's, preferencing, I mean, maybe I'm going too far to say, but actually it conforms to the hegemony that the composer, if you like, has the artistic, the power or the artistic agency, and the performer is just interpreting what the composer wanted him to do. However, having said that, I think there's no doubt that the stereotype of the improviser standing up and doing something completely new every time he improvises is absolutely not true at all. And you used Evan Parker. Evan Parker is a great example. So I said, I don't do something new every time. In fact, when I start my improvisations, I do something the same. Because I have to do something the same to start me off. I always hope that at some point in my improvisation, I might do something new. But I practice improvising, I practice patterns, and when I start, although it's not written down, I kind of know what I'm going to do because I need that platform in order to and it's the possibility of doing something new. And I think for me, that's the improvisatory context does not guarantee that we'll do something new. And you're absolutely right. I do. We fall into the same. It's just not possible to do something new every time. But I think the improvisatory context provides the opportunity to do something new. It also provides the opportunity for a dialogue that is essentially very present and in the moment as well. So sometimes while what I'm doing myself might not necessarily be new for me, it's allowing me to meet somebody musically in the moment that the combination of with the other person, with other people, is something new. But this afternoon when we played, there was 5 or 6, 7 or 8 of us in the room playing. And that, for me, it wasn't the individual, it was the group music that was created was, I don't think I'm overstating it, but it was unique and never to be repeated. And what was exciting for me was the combination of everybody in the room investing in that in that moment. So I think you're absolutely right. The stereotype of improvisers always doing something new is not true. It's not possible. But that doesn't necessarily invalidate the process. So I think John Cage, in one sense, he has a valid point to make. But I'm also aware of the power dynamics and that where John Cage was coming from in terms of the lineage of composers. So, sorry, that was a long answer.
Thanks for this exciting lecture. For me, the delivery is very interesting in several regards, but I just point out two. It's interesting that you start with the Charlie Parker quote, and because for me there is a specific point in time in history when improvisation became a crucial tool, political tool in black music, especially after the Second World War, when the black soldier was promised so much and was given little in relation to what he was promised. And we know the angst that came with bebop and the anger that poured out of that. But the postmodernist take that I like with the delivery is you not being so concerned with the roots and redefining improvisation within a non-political, within a no man's land. And I like that because that's what all art is doing today. I mean, you look at even hip hop is taking beats from the 60s and not acknowledging the historical genesis, but using it to articulate the truth for today. Just the two aspects I wanted to point out.
I mean, that's a really profound and very important point. And while I didn't talk about the political roots or the Afro-American roots of improvisation, there is no doubt that I feel very. One of the biggest inspirations for me in this work is George Lewis, American composer, trombone player, played with the Count Basie band, and a key figure in the Association for the Advancement of Creative Musicians, the AACM, who are 50 years old this year, and they came from Chicago and come absolutely out of that tradition. George Lewis wrote the definitive text on that book, charting the relationship between politics and race and improvisation. And if George was here talking to you today, 50% of his lecture would be around the relationship between politics and race and improvisation. I guess I haven't mentioned it because that's not my experience of the music. It is my experience in terms of listening to the music. It's my experience in terms of enjoying the music. But my own work with improvisations come out of a social context and my own struggle in terms of working as a jazz musician to begin with and finding it very hard to develop as a jazz musician using improvisatory techniques, working as a community musician, having my life changed when faced with working with people with learning difficulties and realising that the skills I'd learned as a jazz musician were no use whatsoever in the context of working with people with autism, having to relearn how to communicate in these contexts. But I think that's a really important point.
We may need to finish here, I think, because we're running over time now. I would like to thank Raymond once again for being here. I would like to also flag up that Raymond is one of our visiting professors, and we're hoping to see more of him in the near future. We sort of always made an informal promise that next time Raymond will be down, we'll do something more performative with structures and ideas around improvisation. I would be very keen to see more movement as part of it, coming from a dance movement psychotherapy background as well. So it might be creative ideas can come and flourish from that. So I'm looking forward for this. And just before we say good night, to say that there are a few more public lectures that are coming. On Monday, we have Professor Helen Payne from the University of Hertfordshire coming to talk about medically unexplained problems and how to intervene through body-mind techniques and ways of intervening. Helen Payne is the founder of dance movement psychotherapy in the UK. She's probably the biggest name and the equivalent to music therapy in a movement dance sort of art form. And we have also Andrew Samuels, who is Professor Andrew Samuels, who is a big name in Jungian analysis, coming in May. And we have Professor Susan Lohmann coming in June to offer an intensive weekend on developmental movement. So these are just I'm flagging up some of them from the series, but I think we need to like to say thank you very much for the third time I think now to Raymond, and yes, thank you for being here.